quitting vaping or smoking? Maybe you tried to quit last year, or maybe this is the year you're finally going to control your nicotine dependency. Jones can help you follow through on your quitting goals. Their FDA-approved nicotine mints give you a healthier alternative. No smoke, no vapor, no pouches, no hidden chemicals, just a discreet mint that can double your chances of quitting successfully. If your New Year's resolution is to quit, or even just to use nicotine in a healthier way, check out Quit with Jones. Go to quitwithjones.com/save10. Take the quiz, get a doctor-recommended plan, and $10 off. Heads up, the mints contain nicotine, which is addictive. Use as directed. Jones products are FDA-approved and for 18 and up only. If you don't use nicotine, don't start. Get in control. Don't let nicotine control you. That's quitwithjones.com/save10 and use code SAVE10 for $10 off.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Wilton, joined by Sergeant Wilton. Clint, how are you?
I'm excellent.
We have a group chat with some of our best friends, and you had sent a video of a sandwich I made you, which was quite impressive. I had gotten some new bread, and little did you know, it was a whole loaf of this Italian seasoned bread from Walmart that I paid a whopping $1.14 for.
Oh my gosh.
And coincidentally, inside of a group chat that I have with other people, they had sent me a video of a guy making something out of a giant loaf of French bread. And so it was very fitting. And I had taken that video that you sent in our other group chat, and I sent it in that group chat. And the comment was basically like in adoration of our relationship and our marriage. And I always try to share like what my impression is based on when somebody says something about our relationship or our marriage. And my response was basically along the lines of like, we keep things calm and simple. Because if I were to summarize everything that I think really makes things work, quote unquote, for us, it's that you and I do a great job at keeping things calm and simple.
Yeah, I think it's super important, especially with, having that, and that's the best definition for it, is calm, simple, and, keeping things exciting and new too. And it's one, we admire each other in everything that we do, and we show up for one another wherever we absolutely can. And I think that's another key factor with it. It's important to be able to show up for one another and highlight each other in their wins.
You mentioned the words show up, and that's a great segue into today's topic, because I think a part of showing up is also making sure that you are able to support your spouse in what it is that they do for work. And there's a lot of very hard lines in life for me. An example that I think I recently talked about with my dad was if something happened and Clint went like berserko left, that's a hard line for me. I couldn't, for any of my morality reasons, I couldn't be married to somebody that went off the deep end like that. And so I have been seeing in the past probably 2 years especially that there are a lot of what just so happens to be mostly females who are married to male police officers that are clashing with what they do for work. I have seen complaints along the lines of not being supportive or appreciative of what they're doing in their work with ICE or immigration and so forth. And I think that it's important to understand what happens when your spouse sees what you do for work differently.
Yeah, I think no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, whether you're on, say, the first responder or the law enforcement side, and you have disagreements going down that route, or your wife has, something that she's doing or to run a business and to try making money for your family and stuff, to be able to support one another. You might not always agree with how things are particularly done, but ultimately you have to support one another and be there for one another. And whether you agree politically or not, it's one of those instances is, this is my career, this is what I'm having to do. Like, I guarantee, going back to 2020 and the George Floyd protest. If I was one of those officers who stepped forward out of the crowd of people and took a knee with these protesters, like, you would have looked at me and like, what the hell just happened there?
Yeah, go enjoy yourself.
Yeah, and because ultimately, like, I would never, like, why would I do that? But that's one of those instances. It's having those conversations with one another and being able to talk, not just to say, oh, this is right and this is wrong. It's saying, like, we're on the same team, we're on the same page. Let's get through this together.
You know what? That's a great point, because I think sometimes communication doesn't exist in the way that it ought to in order for you to have a flourishing marriage and relationship with each other. And so sometimes those lines might get very blurred on morally or religiously, politically, like whatever the things are. If you're not treating your spouse like your friend and having candid conversations like you would with a friend, then those lines will become very messy later on. And there's a psychological concept called parallel realities theory. And I'm not just talking about, oh, I'm your wife and I disagree with the things that you're doing. I'm talking about those spouses that live completely different lives in terms of reality than their other spouse. And that's not always to say that one is right and one is wrong, but I think that it's important to recognize that examples could be that you might, let's say that I think you're overworked as a police officer, and then you're living the reality of just working so hard and providing for your family and doing what is necessary. Or I'll use your mom as an example here. So maybe she's like constantly worrying about you being a police officer, and you are well trained. You know, I know how well trained you are in the capacities that you are capable of. And so those would be two completely different realities, because she's worried about one thing and then you're building your confidence based on, you know, your tactical knowledge and experience on another. And the same thing happens in relationships.
Yeah. And I think it's important to be able to, you know, especially in the first responder realm, say I go to work every day and then you come home and your spouse is saying, how many people did you violate their rights and arrest them today? And like, that would be a hard dynamic. Like, ultimately, long term, if it was your everyday, that wouldn't be sustainable. And it's not fair for one side or the other. It's having that conversation, like, where's this coming from? What's going on here?
A lot of times too, I think that this could happen if, let's say that you didn't marry a police officer, right? You worked in corrections. You weren't a police officer when we got married. And so, but however, our morals and ideals, they were very much aligned before you became a police officer. But I can see that happening when you have a 30-year-old guy and he was working in IT and then all of a sudden decides that he wants to start the academy and become a police officer. Maybe the ideals and his mind shift based on his life experience as a police officer. And then he could be bringing that into the marriage that, you know, it didn't exist before. I can understand how those dynamics happen.
Well, and it's very interesting to think about. And I've seen this happen, especially with our newer officers who come on. I've had some, they were in training and they came straight out and came and said, and yes, I'm a registered Democrat. I vote very left leaning for everything. And like, they're very transparent with that. 6 months in, they go, I think I was confused. And you start seeing that dynamic shift because they start seeing the realities and how voting that way kind of affects that dynamic. It's not saying that they just went extreme conservative Republican or anything like that. It's they started having their eyes open to different realities and experiences to where, especially if that person's married and in a relationship for a long time and you guys are both in that mindset, you're being exposed to that, but your spouse may not be.
Yeah, and you know, there are ways to be able to rebuild that connection, but most importantly, have that understanding with one another. And first of all, you have to be willing to. And I'm pointing that out because had you just gone all berserk left on me, I wouldn't even be willing to entertain that type of work that would be required, because I know that all of it would be fake on my end. You would be getting the flip of the coin that would make you very happy and comfortable, while I would be lying to you and to myself the entire time. So in that instance, somebody like me would not be willing to be able to put in the work. However, when you're willing to, like, things are not so far off that you know that this isn't going to be a continued problem or you're going to be living inauthentically, then there are ways for you to be able to kind of build that communication. And you could have have a two reality rule. And what I mean by that is to understand that you are going to be living and working in one reality while I'll be doing something else and experiencing something completely different. We understand that those two dynamics exist. And then maybe we need to have a weekly meeting to be able to come together to discuss our differences with it.
Yeah, it's being able to have, ultimately what it comes down to is that communication, that shared responsibility for one another to be able to help each other understand. But it's hard when, especially as long as you're not, like you said, devaluing your own integrity and values, and it's important to hold true to who you truly are, whether you agree with something or not. And you're not always going to be able to convince everybody, but you're able to show up and support one another.
Yeah, and I think a good indicator, like something very hard to ask that I would ask a client is, would you still marry the same person today? And is there a way to continue your marriage and make it to where you would still marry that same person today? And in my example of the leftist thing, the answer would be 100% not. Like, I would rather not be married than to put myself in a situation like that. But if it's something more minuscule and it's more of a communication barrier, then try other things. So it could be maybe your spouse would enjoy to go on a ride along with somebody at your department. Like, bring them into your sphere of influence and into your atmosphere and maybe expose them so that you can better explain things from your point of view. And then they can further kind of provide their own opinions about why they feel or maybe felt the way that they do or did. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.